Welcome back to another video from Carl's Cycle Supply. In today's video, we're going to go over our dear friend Gary's 1947 FL. This bike is a 74 cubic inch Harley Davidson Knucklehead. They made about 7,200 74 1200cc bikes in 1947. We're going to talk about some of the trials and tribulations we've had with this bike, or this bike has had, and go over the stuff we had to fix up and restore on it. Thanks for checking it out. If you enjoy it, hit the like and subscribe button. Here is a beautiful 1947 FL that we just finished going through for a very close friend in California named Gary. Gary bought the carcass of this bike back in the early part of the century, right around the turn of the century, not the 20th century, but the 21st century. And it was his first Knucklehead, so it's kind of like your first love. You put it up on a pedestal and do everything you can for it. The motor was rebuilt 4 times before coming to our place. When it showed up, it had a hole in the piston and a broken front motor mount and kind of needed some help. So we'll talk about 47s, we'll talk about this bike some more, and just kind of go over the fun details. So this bike is very nice, it's very correct. When we got it here for the motor inspection, he had problems with burning a hole in the piston. And we had redone the heads before that and did them just like every set that we've done before that. And a couple other shops had rebuilt the motor before that, and they were pretty reputable dudes, so it was surprising for Gary to have so many problems with it. So the last time he burned a hole in the piston, I said, hey, bring the bike over, let's take it apart. While you're here, we'll figure out what went wrong, what we need to change. We took the bike apart and didn't find any big red flags. We did find 2 problems. One of them was that the rear exhaust pipe was very loose in the exhaust port. The other one, which I think is probably the biggest problem, was this little screw that holds the spark advance cable in. The screw was too short and it wasn't pinching in on the cable. So I think what might have happened is the bike would retard as he was running down the road. Those were the only 2 things I could find wrong with it. It's hard to believe that a 90-cent screw would cause so much damage, but stranger things have happened. So anyways, when we were taking the motor out, we noticed that the front left motor mount was broken, which is a very common thing to happen on all Knucklehead frames. There was also some damage and trauma and repair where these bottom tubes go into the seat post cross member. So we ended up replacing the bottom rails. I think there was maybe a crack in the top motor mount. So not that big of a deal. While we were at it, we got an original front fender and had our friend Joe straighten it out. It turned out really nice, and then also it had a repo brake pedal and mount, and we found some original ones and switched that out. And then he also had some really nice original tank emblems that had not been restored, and they kind of looked out of place on the bike. I ended up trading him a restored set of original emblems for the patina emblems, which I think we'll put on my son's 49 when we get that far on that bike. The rear fender is a late 47 fender. It has the channels for the wiring harness. It was drilled for saddlebags and we filled those holes. Fit the fender to the bike, got it painted, and everything's good and happy. Like I mentioned earlier, Gary got this bike around the turn of the century. He bought the motor on eBay and then bought the hulk of the chassis from some guys in San Diego, and they had sold the motor out of it in the 60s and it had just sat on their back porch. You know, back in the early 2000s it was much easier to find parts. So he went to town, found a bunch of great stuff, and turned it into a running motorcycle. It was really pretty correct when we got it as far as finishes and parts and this and that. You could tell that he was kind of looking at early 47s, like factory photos, and matched it to that. It had metal footboard mats on it. This is a late one, so it would have had rubber ones. And then he had Parkerized nuts here, which are on the prototype, but 47 had CAD nuts here and chrome acorn nuts. He had done a really good job. We just changed a few things. Fixed the frame, fixed the motor, painted it, put one of our mufflers on it. I fixed the rear header pipe that was loose in here. When I run into this problem, I take a piece of sheet metal that's the same width as the area the pipe engages into the head, and then I braze a strip around it, and then I sand that strip to fit perfect in here so that you can lift the bike up by the exhaust. you know, the whole thing would just move, rattle around before. Now it's perfect. 47 was really a special year. This is the last year that they made a Knucklehead. They came in 3 colors, Skyway Blue, FlightRed, and black. They had 3 different frames. The early ones were in a bull neck like a 46, and then later on they came out with this steering neck, which the whole area that the stem goes through is parallel. The forging dies for this were later modified to incorporate a key lock and then a pin for making panhead necks. This bike is the 2nd year of this style of headlight mount and a shock. It's the 1st year for an accessory power terminal. 46 would just have a headlight power terminal. It's original Delco Remy horn, original guide fender light. Something that's kind of cool that Gary set up as personal preference was putting it on 18-inch wheels. You could get 18-inch rims in 47, but for the most part they were 16-inch wheels. Some of the other new features for 47, they have a 1-year only speedometer. The outlook lens is clocked to 20-30 degrees and on the side instead of being centered. It has a 1-year only face. And then the dash is new for 47, as well as the tank emblems and the tail light. These were kind of designed by a company called Brooks Stevens Design. They were in Wisconsin. They were famous for designing cars, appliances, radios. They played a much bigger role with Harley in designing the hydraulic fork that came out in 49. We'll talk about that in a later video. I was talking to one of my friends in California about Brooks Stevens, and he told me about a tabletop radio that Brooks Stevens designed, and the knob for changing the volume in the channel looked just like the round part of the speedball emblem. Now this is kind of the most evolved version of a Knucklehead they made. These things are indestructible. This bike is set up to ride. It's super cool. It's an offset fork, of course, that came out in late 46, and this is like the standard or sidecar bend handlebars. They're much longer than the Speedsters. These are really, really comfortable to ride and use. I love them. You find more Speedsters and offset forgings than you do the standard bend, which is reversed for when you compare them to inline bars. If you look at the tank emblem, you can see how cool the design is, and you can also see this brown paper gasket that goes behind it. The gasket never really fits that good. You know, you see some of it here and some of it here, and then none of it in other areas. It looks out of place, but that's what they did originally. So looking at the left side, you can really see a lot of cool parts. The bike is super sleek, super long. The other thing worth noting that they changed in 47 was the shift gate pattern. Now, 1st gear is back, and 2nd, 3rd, and 4th is forward. I don't know why they changed this. It kind of feels fun when you're going fast because you're like shifting forward to the gears, and it's fun. But to do this, they still use the same shift drum in here, but they reverse the shift lever 180 degrees. Now it points down instead of being up. It's a late 47, so it has rubber handlebar grips. It has a late frame. If the tanks were off, I would be able to show you the top motor mount tank mounts. That's something that differentiates a late 47 frame from a super late 47 frame. This serial number is 11,000, so it's definitely one of the last ones made. Thanks for watching. If you love old motorcycles and would love to follow along on our old motorcycle restorations, builds, and adventures, hit the like and subscribe button. Stay tuned for our next video where we'll be going over, you guessed it, Harley Davidson Knuckleheads. Thanks for watching. See you out on the road.